Greetings all. Lovely to be here on this sunny Sabbath day. Still chilly down here, but the sun's nice and warm. So no doubt later on we'll be migrating out to the sunny side of the patio. Today we're looking at these three dates: 2025, 2028, and 2030. And seeing what is the connection of these three dates and events that are happening in the world today and what's coming in the near future. Let's just bow our heads for a word of prayer. Gracious Father, we come to you today as your needy children. We come, Father, because we're aware of our need of you every moment of every day. We thank you for your presence in our lives, for revealing yourself to us, and for giving us the greatest gift you could give us, which was your Son, Jesus. We gratefully accept his life in exchange for ours, and we are so thankful that we are now seated in heavenly places in Christ Jesus. This is our reality. We are sons and daughters of the Most High God. Father, as we go through this presentation this morning, we pray that your Spirit will guide us and lead us, and may we open our hearts to hear your truth, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. 2025 is going to be a huge year. We're starting today in 2 Timothy chapter 3. I'm not sure whether we're going to get through all of this in one session. If not, we will carry on later. 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 13. 3:13. Interesting numbers, isn't it? 3:13. Especially when you read the verse. Chapter 3, verse 13. But evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. Fitting numbers for evil men and deceivers that are going to wax worse and worse. We're all familiar with the evolving of the whole transgender movement. But do you know there's a lot of other trans movements that have just started taking off? One of those is called transracial. People are now identifying as a different race. In fact, there was a woman who identified as a black person and joined the black movement. Subsequently, after a while, she was declared to be a liar and was put out of the movement. I wonder how that works in the transgender movement. If someone's declaring they're a male and going into female toilets and change rooms and then is found out to be a liar, can they be prosecuted? Don't know. So transracial is a new one. There's another movement called transable. Transable, people identifying with people who are disabled and choosing to be treated as a disabled person. And the latest one I heard was called trans age. Older people identifying as children and trying to get benefits as children, saying this is how I identify now. That's the other one, yeah. Trans species was the other one. I didn't mention that one, where people are identifying as animals and wanting to be treated in that way.
Schools are giving pet food bowls.
I've heard that schools were giving the kids pet bowls. I wonder if they're giving them pet food.
They're giving them litter to go to the toilet.
Litter to go to the toilet, yeah. The fact that we're pandering to these ridiculous situations shows you where the world's going.
That's the government.
Evil and deceitful men waxing worse and worse. Where does it end? Where does all this stupidity end? Because it's only these absolute minority groups who are wielding such power and the vast majority of people are just sort of putting their hands up saying, oh, well, if that's what they want to do, let them do it. Where will it end? So this is the world in which we live, the crazy world in which we live. 2023. Here we are, halfway through the year already. Gone fast, isn't it? But 2025 is going to be a big year. One of the indicators of why that's going to be the case is Passover 2024. Did anyone see that 5 red heifers were delivered from the USA to Israel recently? Okay. 5 red heifers have been bred in America for the last couple of decades. They've been working on it. And the reason why the red heifers are important is because according to the Jewish system, if they want to, when they want to build the third temple and have that temple dedicated, they also have to have their priests dedicated. And the way that happens is that opposite where the temple is on the Mount of Olives, they have to sacrifice a red heifer, and then the ashes are taken and mixed with water, and the priests are anointed, and that enables them then to start the sanctuary services. So back, I think it was just last month in May, 5 red heifers were delivered to Israel. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, the big deal is that these heifers have been really difficult to breed because they're not allowed to have one black hair or one white hair on them anywhere. And over the course of the years, they've had a number of red heifers that they thought would be kosher, if you like, but proved as they grew older not to be because they started to get these hairs. They're not to have any wavy hairs. All the hair has to be perfectly straight because the red heifer, according to this tradition, wasn't to have been carved, not to have been milked, and not to have been yoked. So if there's any curly hair, that could mean that they've been yoked. So this is how strict they've been. But they've now had 5 delivered. And when they interviewed one of the priests who was going to be anointed by this ceremony, he said, now all we have to do is wait until Passover 2024. That was the date he gave of when one of these heifers would be sacrificed and this anointing would take place. So what does that mean? Well, it means that they have this in their mind. If they're going to anoint a priesthood to serve in the third temple, that the third temple is going to be in and around that time frame. Imminent, exactly. They've already got all of the priests selected. They've already got all of the robes made. They've got all of the instruments and furniture and so on, the menorah and all these things have all been made. The ark has been reproduced, and they've now got, what I've heard is they've got the temple prefabricated so that they can actually build it very quickly in a short period of time. And now you're noticing also that they're now saying the Dome of the Rock doesn't have to be taken down for the new temple to be built. It can be built next to it. So this is what they're now saying. Why is that significant? Well, it's significant because according to most evangelical churches and outlook on prophecy, they believe that the 70th week of Daniel was cut off from Daniel chapter 9, the 70 weeks. The last week was cut off and was put into the future, that we're now in this gap phase. And in the future, the Messiah is going to arise, or the Antichrist, and the temple will be functioning, and he will go into the temple in the midst of the last 7 years, and after 3.5 years, and will be revealed as the Antichrist, and blah, 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 and then Christ will come and set up 1,000 years of peace on earth. So the temple, the third temple, is an integral part of the fulfillment of this prophecy, right? So they've got to anoint the priest, they've got to build the temple before the whole Antichrist deal can work its way through in prophecy. I personally don't believe that. I believe that's a red herring. It's a smokescreen. It's the deceptive side of end time prophecy. It's Satan's distraction from who the true Antichrist is, what the ultimate return of Christ is, and people are going to be led astray by it. And I'm going to expand on that further. We'll look further into this year, 2025. So that's the first one I've got is the red heifers and this taking place. The other interesting side note about that process is that the Mount of Olives is not controlled by the Jews. And so what a group of priests did is they actually went and had to buy an acre of land on the Mount of Olives so that they could have a place where they can do it, because they have to look directly into the where the temple's going to be. So that's another side note there. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, and these are in no particular order. So number two is pandemic. Just put number two. We've just been through number one. So we've gone over some of this stuff in the past, but I just want to pull this together so we can see the context of where it is. Back in October 18, 2019, so 4 years ago now, an event took place called Event 201. We've heard of that before, where it was a tabletop scenario of what would happen if a pandemic broke out. What would we do? How would we deal with all of these things? And it was simulated, and it was the WHO. And as you know, the WHO is the health arm or the agency of the United Nations. So basically, it was the United Nations being represented by the World Health Organization. It was also supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So we know Deadly Bill, and also the Johns Hopkins Center for Health, which is one of the big universities over in America. And so in this scenario, they said that the key group that was going to be impacted by it was the elderly, and that they would have to do a whole number of things within communities in order to contain this pandemic. So people were going to have to be locked down. We're going to have strict regulations of how people interact, and they'll have to shut down travel and so on and so on. Just by pure coincidence, 2 months later, it's the beginning of COVID-19. And in December, well, actually it was December 29 that there was the Wuhan outbreak. And by January 25th, 2020, it's hit Australia. And in March of that year, the World Health Organization declares a COVID-19 pandemic, and it's on for young and old. So that was 2019. In October 23rd of last year, 2022, another simulated tabletop conference took place, and it was called Catastrophic Contagion. That was the name they gave it. Again, it was the WHO, Bill Gates Foundation, and Johns Hopkins Center for Health. And they said that this second scenario was based in the near future. That's what they called it, the near future. And they labeled the virus as SEERS 2025, and that SEERS stands for Severe Epidemic Enterovirus Respiratory Syndrome. So that's what SEERS stands for. And I find it interesting that they've used the term seer. What's a seer?
Profit.
A prophet, someone who sees into the future. So they've called this pandemic seers. And what date are they putting on it? Seers year after next. Seers 2025. And I just looked at that and I thought, okay, they can't help themselves, but put it in under your nose in advance, and then they just start playing with you. So this outbreak is going to be, according to catastrophic contagion, this is going to break out in Latin America this time. So this will probably be a monkey virus or something like that from down that way. They're saying this one's going to be more deadly than COVID-19, and it's not going to impact the old as much as it's going to impact babies, toddlers, and early teens. So that's the targeted group for next time. Okay, they're the targeted group. Now, I'm thinking to myself, COVID-19 was predominantly for over 65s. They were the targeted groups. Why were pregnant women encouraged to take that vaccine? Why were they encouraged to vaccinate their babies, their toddlers, and so on, if there was a 99.79% recovery rate within those age groups? Why is the next contagion going to be aimed at that group? You know, is something already there that's going to be manifested or switched on or whatever? It's already within them. We've already got it. We don't know, but that's just some surmising on my behalf. So we've got the history that they planned the first one, they instituted it, they saw the reaction of the public, that basically everyone just kowtowed to what they were told to do, shut their businesses, locked themselves away, took the vaccine, and they implemented a whole lot of new technology in preparation for number two. So at the moment, as one guy that I've been listening to pointed out, he said, we're now in the eye of the storm. We thought the last 3 years was bad, and how quickly have we forgotten some of the stuff that went on during those early days, you know, that people weren't able to attend family members' funerals, weddings, birthdays. Mark put his hand up. Wasn't allowed to go and to your grandmother's funeral.
Oh, it was going to cost me $13,000 to get there and back.
Yeah, and that's right. And if you went from one state to the other, just crossed the line at Tweed Heads, it was 14 days isolation. You had to get locked down for 14 days and so on. People know all the airlines worldwide shut down in the early times. They talked about conspiracy theorists were saying, oh, they're going to institute a passport with a green, amber, and red light. And everyone was going, oh, no, don't be stupid. Well, they did, of course. We had QR codes to get into shops. I drove from here down to Byron Bay to play golf one Sunday, and I was pulled up by the police and I had to turn around and come home because that golf course was out of my zone. And I was like 100 meters away from it when he pulled me up. So absolutely crazy stuff that went on. But we tend to forget all of that because now everything's back to normal. Admittedly, it's a new normal, but it's still sort of normal. But what's coming next? You know, we thought that first one was bad. How bad if it's deadlier than the first one? Was the first one deadly? Maybe. Interestingly, they said that the new influenza is more deadly than old influenzas used to be because of what happened with COVID. There was no influenza And so our immunity to it was broken during that 3-year period because there was no influenza at that time. That's bizarre. So COVID, the flu must have known that COVID was going to do enough. So it didn't bother to show up for a couple of years, according to the health statistics. Anyway, here we go. So this is the next one that's coming up. Now, what's impressive to me is that on the 23rd of May, just last month, the World Health Organization warns that the next pandemic will be deadlier, right? Exactly. Well, we know because we're the ones organizing it. This is the next big one. On the 5th of June, so just a couple of weeks ago, not even that. What are we up to now? It's the 17th. So 12 days ago, the European Union Commission and the WHO launched the Digital Health Initiative. What they're saying was that the EU, during the first pandemic, developed a digital health initiative, a passport that was very effective. And it was the green, yellow, and red light version. And it was so effective that even though that pandemic is no longer a pandemic, we're still going to develop further the digital system so that when the next one comes, we'll already have it in place and we won't be caught napping like we were the first time. And they're calling this, this is coming from the World Health Organization website, you can go and check it out for yourself. They're calling it the first building block of the GDHCN. So the GDHCN, which is the Global Digital Health Certification Network. So what was just in Europe is now going global. So this is going to be the Global Digital Health Certification Network. So that means you can't travel, you can't go out and buy stuff, you can't do anything, you can't go anywhere, you can't work, you'll be permanently locked down unless you have this certification. And they're implementing this 1st of July this year. Yeah, they've done the pre-launch, which was done in a month ago or a couple of days ago, but they're actually implementing it starting July 1st. And I assume that's going to be in Europe or somewhere like that. And it's going to be spreading around the world. So who signed up for this certification? All the UN member states. That's 191 countries have signed up for it, including Australia, including China, including Russia, have already signed up. Yeah, so you can't travel, you can't do anything. Now, what's even more troubling is that because this is global certification, that means other countries have access to your health information, right? So not just your own country. This is trans country, another one of the trans things. This is trans country. This goes across the whole world. So other countries can access your personal health stuff. So remember the sayings that came out, no jab, no job, that was there, be the same this time. No vax, no travel, you'll be segregated from society, and the World Health Organization has control over every country, and they can say, right, your country has this problem, you have to lock down, and the country has to do it because if you're a signature member of the UN, then you have to comply with what the UN tells you to do. So we could have UN troops coming into Australia to enforce UN or WHO directed lockdowns in the future. Matthew 10:22. Let's see what the Bible said is going to happen. Matthew 10 verse 22. And you shall be what? Hated of all men for my name's sake, but he that endures to the end shall be saved. Do you remember when Daniel was taken prisoner by the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar? He was taken to Babylon and he was put into like an elite school to be trained in the ways of the Babylonians so that he could then be sent back to his own area and reign on behalf of Babylon in those areas. The first test that he faced in Daniel chapter 1, let's go back to Daniel chapter 1. If you're familiar with this, you'll know what Daniel did. Daniel chapter 1 and verse 8, you'll remember that the captain of the eunuchs came in and said, right, the king's providing you with the king's food and the king's wine that you ought to eat. And Daniel verse 8 says, but Daniel did what? Purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested, and so he went on, made his request, and we know the story. But the key thing is that at the point where Daniel had to make a decision as to whether he was going to comply with the rules and laws of Babylon or whether he was going to stand separate regardless of the outcome, he purposed, he made a decision, right? He committed himself before God that he was not going to defile himself. Well, once he knew that he had to eat it, that's when he purposed in his heart that he wouldn't defile himself by eating that food and drinking that food. He has to. Once he knew he had to eat that food, that's when he purposed in his heart he wasn't going to do it. He made his decision. So we're coming to the point. We've already been through the first test, which was pandemic number 1, where many of us made a decision. No, we're not going to comply. I was talking to my son yesterday. He's a sergeant in the Queensland Police. He had a number of people in his station who refused to take the jab. And we know there were doctors, we know that there were nurses, teachers, frontline staff, various people who refused to take the jab and were dismissed because of that. There were many police who refused to take the jab and they were fired for not complying to instructions. Some left voluntarily, but in the station where my son is, there were 3 police who made a different stance. What they did was they sued the Commissioner of Police on the basis that their employer had no right to mandate that they take some sort of medical procedure. So it'd be like your boss saying you have to have a vasectomy if you want to work here. You could take that boss to court because he's mandating that you have to have a legal procedure, a medical procedure. So they're suing the Commissioner of Police on that basis. Those 3 men have not been dismissed. They're not allowed to be dismissed because they're suing the Commissioner. That's going to a hearing next year or later this year, I think they said. So for 3 years, those 3 guys have been at home, working from home as policemen, right? 3 years they've been that way. Now that the pandemic's over, they're now back at the station, right? As if nothing's happened. But the suit is still going through because they're saying, well, it wasn't about whether I'm working or not working. It's about whether your employer has the right to mandate. That's the legal thing that they're challenging. So if they lose, well, then I don't know what the repercussions will be there, but if they win, it sets a precedent for lots of other people to be able to make that same claim in the future. Right? Interesting that who's screaming for workers at the moment? Police, doctors, nurses, teachers are all in short supply. Yeah, military too. Yeah, who knows? But there are ways and means around, I guess, at the moment. So here the scripture saying that in Matthew there that we're going to be hated by all men. This is worldwide impact, and this is where we're going. I'm just going to talk about something else in a moment, which will be of interest as well. And we know in Matthew 24, it talks about wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes in various places, pestilences and famines. And this is where we're heading at the moment. Okay, another interesting meeting that took place back in 2017, which is still under the pandemic, so I won't put it up as a separate thing, but the Johns Hopkins Centre for Health ran a similar sort of scenario called SPARS, don't know what that stands for, but it was a pandemic scenario, and it was set between the years 2025 to 2028. They were the years that this system took up. And overall, what people have been coming under the influence of, which they weren't even aware of, was a thing called mass formation. Have you heard of that before, that term, mass formation? Basically, it's a psychological way of controlling people, right? The other name is mass psychosis. And what happens, the first thing that they do is they isolate people. When you isolate people from having human contact, we're social beings, aren't we? Humans, we need social contact. You lock people away. This is what happens in aged care facilities and that, when people don't get visitors and they're just stuck in rooms on their own for a long time. Prisons are the same. Social isolation leads to anxiety, stress, and depression. And people get to a psychological state where they're just like non-responsive and feel like there's no hope. The next thing that happens, they lose all sense of meaning and purpose. There's no drive, there's no motivation, and there's no point to their lives. And that's why we saw a spike of suicides during the early days because of the COVID-1, because people were sensing this sense of lack of purpose. Then they bring in like the whole thesis, antithesis, synthesis, the problem, solution, outcome that they look for. So they create the problem, that's the pandemic, sets up people psychologically to be weakened, and then they bring in the solution. Well, the solution was the vaccine. This is the solution. And so now what happens is that these people who are in this state, even though they may still be isolated, they now have a common rallying point around which they form. So this is the mass, right? And they form this mass around this common narrative. So the media steps in and ups the narrative. Everything, the government, everything else pushes the same narrative, and people connect to it. And in that process of connection, they're willing to surrender personal freedoms, right? So no longer is it about the personal, your personal freedom. Now it's about the community freedom. What is in the, what's the word? The common good. Yeah, what's the common good? And this is what Pope Francis has been saying, that it's not about individual freedom anymore, it's about the common good, the freedom for all. The next step, which is the troubling one, is that once this sense of mass formation has occurred, the next step is that they become intolerant to any dissension. That was, and we saw that, didn't we?
With the backing of the people.
Yeah, well, it is the people doing it, supporting it. And so we saw people walking into a supermarket without a mask on being attacked by people with masks on and accusing them of being a threat to the common good. Physically, exactly, physically, emotionally, verbally attacked. And this we saw cause huge splits within families, friendships, work situations, where people became very, very intolerant of anyone who was dissenting from the narrative. And as we just pointed out, ultimately were prepared to become violent, chopping off family members, refusing to talk to them, or even within the same households. Incredible. And this was the psyop. This was the mass psychosis of the outcome of that. Having been through that, like having been pre-trained already, if another outbreak occurs, which is affecting children, not just the old people now, but people's kids, they'll be faster, they'll be more violent,
more powerful.
yeah, the whole trip. Not the children, that's right.
Put them in jail.
Yeah. Yeah. And one question people will be saying is, if there is a God, why is he allowing the children to suffer? That's right. So this is where we're heading, and we need to be aware that it's pre-planned, it's preordained as far as they're concerned, and they're working steadily towards this 2025 to 2028 timeframe. That's where they're lobbing it. So we've just come out of 3 years of pandemic. They're saying there's going to be 3 more starting 2025, according to their timetable. Okay, so Daniel chapter 12. When Daniel sees the outplay of what's happening at the end of time, in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, he says, and at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which stands for the children of thy people, and there shall, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. So Daniel is saying at the end of time, it's going to be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation. So a time of trouble, a time of persecution, where you're going to be hated by all men. Yeah. Well, this is what's coming, and we have to purpose in our hearts before it happens. Are we going to accept the king's food and wine, which are the benefits of what they are offering to you? If you get the passport, take the jab, live your life, be free, be happy, or are you going to make a stand on principle against defiling the temple of God? I'm not going to put that vaccine into my body. I'm not going to take on board the authority that I don't recognize as being from God and make my stand regardless. That's what Daniel and the three worthies did, because what went in chapter 1 of Daniel from purposing in their heart not to eat and drink the king's food, by Daniel chapter 3, it came to a matter of worship. We will not bow down and worship. And that's the same with these things. You compromise at the beginning. Every Hebrew boy who compromised with the meat and drink compromised with the bowing down. So you need to purpose in your heart early. You're not going to take a little step, because you take that little step, it's one step to the big step.
So that's the baby step.
That's the baby step into it. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I was saying to you. The last 3 years has been the soft test.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is going to be a hard test. Then when they bring in the whole climate laws, which is going to be associated with the day of worship, that's going to be the.
Yeah.
It's like little tests leading up to the final exam.
Yeah. Because they know if you can't buy and sell, you're more vulnerable. So these are going to be steps. So this certification network is going to be the point where you make a decision. Okay, is this compromising where I'm going with this, or is it still okay? Or do I have to make my stand now and move forward from here? Okay, number 3. Cashless. So central bank digital currencies are the thing that are on the way. So what's the problem with a different form of financial system? Central bank digital currencies, you guys know a lot more about this than me, but my understanding is that it's programmable. Is that right?
Programmable, and it can only be basically only spent in your 15-minute radius on products they choose.
Okay. So basically what it is, you get rid of cash, and how you transact buying and selling and the exchange of goods is you use central bank digital currencies, which is like a cryptocurrency controlled by the central banks of each country. And because it's digital, it goes into your digital account, your digital wallet or whatever it might be. And that means that that central bank can control how you spend that money. So they might say, unlike cash, if I've got $1,000 and I've got it under my mattress and I have a crisis where I need some cash, I can go to my mattress, pull out the money, and I can spend it. With a CBDC, the central bank might say, okay, the economy's down a bit, we need to get people to spend to boost the economy. And so unless you spend that within 30 days, you lose it. So what does everyone do? Oh, I'm going to lose my digital currency, so I'll go out and spend it. And they get the results. So they're controlling how you spend. They may say, because they can track every transaction that you've made, they may say, oh, listen, Dave, you've got a heart problem, you've already had a stent put in and a triple bypass. You're spending too much of your money on junk food or red meat or alcohol or cigarettes. Therefore, you're a burden on society, because if you get sick again, it costs us a lot of money to make you well. So we're going to restrict you on what you can spend your money on as far as food or drink or whatever it might be. Right? Imagine that amount of control. Can you imagine? Because at the moment, with cash, we're used to having freedom as to how we spend it. I can give it to someone, I can put that, do this, however we want to spend our money. We can do that. Take out cash and you're dependent on a CBDC to be able to transact. Well, you're now controllable. Can you imagine going to a shopkeeper and saying, okay, I want a hamburger and chips and you go to pay for it and it says declined.
Not only that, the other thing too, if you drive too far, too much fuel,
Mm.
you can automatically be taxed the carbon tax, which will automatically come out of your money. It won't even be a bill, it'll come straight out.
Right. So what Rob's just saying, if you didn't hear it, is he's saying that if in a situation because of the whole climate thing with your carbon footprint, if you're traveling too far unnecessarily, probably wouldn't apply to truck drivers and taxis and stuff. But if you're using too much fuel, then you're increasing your carbon footprint. And with a CBDC, they don't ask you for a payment, they just withdraw a carbon tax out of your money, out of your account. And it'll be the same with tax. They'll just take every transaction, the GST will come out automatically. You've already paid it with, everything else that goes on. Taxes will just come out, fines. You speed, you won't even go to court. You'll just have the money withdrawn from your account. So you're totally
Instant.
controllable. Yeah, instant.
Interest rates and inflation as well.
Yeah, anything like that, is happening. I read an article where it said that by 2025, there's that year again, less than 10% of payments in Australia will be with cash. Less than 10%. So they're hoping cash will be out by 2025. Now, for many people, that's fine, because they just walk around with one of these devices and whatever payment you make, it's all done here.
During the COVID, certain places,
Yeah, that's right. They wouldn't accept cash during the COVID thing. The ANZ Bank now has branches that won't handle cash across the counter. Yeah, I went to a news agents in Mullumbimby during the pandemic and offered a $20 note for something I bought, and the girl turned around and lifted up a paper towel, and there on the counter was all this money, and she took it and gave me the change, and she said, "We're literally washing our money." Because you're money laundering. That's what I said. I said, "Oh, you're money laundering." And she said, because of the amount of human contact. People go so far. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. So that's the cashless. So they're heading to 2025 to be cashless, and the CBDCs are getting started already. Now, this is probably one you haven't heard of, or to this extent anyway. The New Age. Some of us have heard of peoples like Elena Blavatsky, Alice A. Bailey, who was the guy in America, Krem, Aleister Crowley, all these different people. I'm going to read you Rosicrucianism, Theosophical. These were all the founders of those movements. Okay, here's an article that says the books of Alice A. Bailey were intended to be study guides for disciples and initiates up until 2025. So who's Alice Bailey? Alice Bailey lived from the late 1800s through till about 1950, something like that. And she was in contact with one of the masters of the supreme hierarchy, demon spirit, in other words, called Dwal Kul. He was a Tibetan priest. She called him the Tibetan. And in harmony, in association with Dwal Kul, Alice Bailey was given like automatic writing and and wrote many books about love and all this sort of stuff. And we'll get into that in a little bit further. But basically, she initiated the New Age, precursor of the New Age, which started in 1965. It says here, she says, so the books of Alice Bailey, I'll just read that again, were intended to be study guides for disciples and initiates up until 2025, when a new round of teachings are set to begin another dispensation. Right, so 2025, they're saying, is the start of a new. The Bailey books followed on from those of Elena Blavatsky, who was a Ukrainian mystic. World evil has not been sealed away, has not yet been sealed away. The main thrust of work among people of goodwill, that's who they think they are, is to make fundamental changes in human thought and the public aware of a spiritual direction for the planet that underlies the events of the times. This is being vigorously opposed by materialistic instincts at present. So she's written, this is back in the 1940s after the Second World War, but it is possible of attainment and will continue until 2025. The dispelling of world glamour and illusion is the outstanding theme of work to be undertaken until 2025. So they're saying until 2025, we've got to get rid of all of this materialism and all of this focus on glamour and glitz and blah, blah, blah that's in the world, because we have to get ready for the changeover in 2025. A new spiritual potential or energy will begin to manifest slowly after 2025, while the present energy is rapidly passing out. We only need more light to offset the more materialistic interests. The intensification of light will continue until 2025, after which a relatively stable period will intervene. So she's saying from 2025, shortly thereafter, there's going to be a relative time of peace. Any verse spring to mind?
Peace and safety.
When they say peace and safety, then what? Sudden destruction. So just like we're in a relative calm at the moment between storms, after 2025, there's going to be a time of relative peace or stability. Now listen to this. The concept of a world federation of nations, remembering this was written back in 1945, is rapidly forming. What was forming? The UN. Out of World War I came the League of Nations, which evolved into the UN. Will be forming and will be universally recognized, desired, and worked for by 2025. It will not be perfect, but its outline will be in place by that time. Watch for the words spoken by world leaders in that regard. Is that where we're heading now? We're definitely moving towards this whole one world system. George Bush Sr. spoke of it when he was back in the day. Saying here, very great changes will be seen to have taken place until 2025 from post-World War II years and have increased in activity and speed. Have we seen that? Have we seen an increase in activity and speed? I've been doing a bit of a deep dive into AI and where AI is at the moment. And what was new technology a week ago has been surpassed, and very, very, very quickly, and to the point where I think something like there's a petition that's gone out that they should put a hold on it for 6 months, because it's coming to the point where AI is becoming self-determining. That means it doesn't need human input to decide what it wants to do. So they're saying that we need to check this because we don't have laws and ethical standards in place to be able to cope with it. It's run away from us. Listen to what she says now. In 2025, and the exact date will be set sometime in the future, for the first stage of the reappearance of the spiritual hierarchy on earth in physical form. What's she saying? While Ku was one of the masters of the supreme hierarchy, she's saying the masters of the universe are going to manifest on earth physically sometime after 2025. Who appears as an angel of light? Satan, seeking whom he may devour. He's that roaring lion, but he appears as an angel of light. And I'm going to read to you something very shortly. Due to the nature of human progress, the schedule in terms of what is to unfold, 2025 is a benchmark date for what is to come for humanity and the planet as a whole. And she closed by saying, control of the world's resources will increasingly come under the control of those people whose primary motivation is that of service and goodwill. They will exist in their millions by 2025. Are we seeing a shift within business, organizations, corporations, and so on, towards being men of goodwill, right? And service to humanity? Now, you got the Bill Gates, you got all Soros, forget all their names, but all the big corporations now are taking on board the whole climate change thing, better resources for their workers and all that sort of stuff. Sorry? Yeah.
Yeah, BHP have gotten rid of all their coal mines and are going into renewables.
Yeah, that's right.
Looking towards the future.
There you go. So we're seeing this trend happening. And I was sort of surprised that so many big name guys was getting on board with all this stuff. But here you are, this is all part of the process because they're all controlled by the same.
Even despite profits.
Yeah, in spite of profit, that's right. Yeah, in spite of or despite profits, as you say. So
they're actually saying that if you don't get on board, you'll miss out on your profits, and it's a huge industry. I think like BlackRock and that they have huge amount of shares in all these companies anyway, so they're kind of directing stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Behind the scenes.
Christine and I last weekend, Chris asked me a question. Have you heard of the Grey Pope? I think you guys were talking about that last weekend or the weekend before last. The Grey Pope. I'd never heard of the Grey Pope. So we did a bit of investigation and found that we know there's a white Pope. Some of us have heard of the Black Pope, who's the Jesuit general, but there's this Grey Pope. So who's the Grey Pope? So I'll put that there. It's the grey, the black, and the white. The Grey Pope controls the Black Pope and the White Pope. That's why he's the Grey Pope. He's in the middle. Mix the black and white, you get grey. Who do we see as standard the elite of the world? Give me some names. The Rockefellers, Rothschilds,
They're second tier.
Kennedys, all these people. Yeah, all of these people, we see them as the elite, and they're all seen as being up there and controlling the strings of what's going on in the world. But what we found was that there's a higher level called the black nobility. 13 families who from about the 12th century started to control all the trade around the world. So you had one family would control all the gold and precious metals, one would control all the diamonds and gems, and another one would control all trade in this market, another one control all the banking and all these different things. And the top guy, who is one of these families. His name's Pepe Orsini. The Orsini house is one of those 13 families. You may have heard of the Medicis back in the day. One of the Medicis was a pope. All of these families, and basically Pepe Orsini is regarded as the king of Europe, and he is the grey pope. So he's the one who's controlling the black pope and the white pope. Now, there's been a change because the white pope that we have now is actually a Jesuit. So he has his allegiance to the general of the Jesuits, and his allegiance is up there. So that's the grey pope. So these are the ones who are actually controlling what's going on. All of the others, the Rothschilds and all those crew, they're just pawns, right, on the chessboard. They're the ones who've been moved around playing the games, but the real control is behind them, and they're unseen. So where you have Bill Gates with a couple of $100 billion, these 13 families, they're trillions and trillions of dollars.
Countries over in Europe.
Yeah,
Then it's more,
yeah,
especially owned.
exactly right. And even like the Windsors, King Charles, they're one of the pawns. They're just they're sub-families, if you like, yeah, to these families, and they've sworn their allegiance. One article talked about the United States Corporation. The United States is already within this system as a separate corporation. Okay, so this is the new age, how important this is. Now, can anyone here remember back in, I think it was like 1975, around that era, in newspapers all around the world, and I even saw one on the station, on a billboard at the railway station in Melbourne, and it was called The Great Invocation.
Yep.
Remember that? It was the New Age prayer for humanity. Okay. All right. Well, it starts off from the point of light within the mind of God. Okay, so this is written in 1937 through Alice Bailey from Dwar Kul, right, one of the masters. And this is what it says. Now, you tell me if most people would think this was pretty good, even Christians. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men, let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men, may Christ return to earth. From the centre where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the centre which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Now, they've amended that prayer somewhat recently to no longer say, may Christ return to earth, because there's an asterisk after that. And in the writings, it says, many religions believe in a world teacher, a coming one, knowing him under such names as the Lord Maitreya, the Imam Mahdi, the Kalkai Avatar, and the Bodhisattva. These terms are sometimes used in versions of the Great Invocation for people of specific faiths, right? And so they've changed it now, may the coming one return to earth. So this is the invocation, the calling of the master to return, who I believe will be Lucifer. Interesting that it's published. Who knows where it was published? Who the publisher was? Lucis Trust, formerly known as Lucifer Trust. Changed their name to Lucis Trust, and they print all the works of Theosophical Society, and
To this day.
to this day, exactly right. And you can just go online and look up the Great Invocation, you have a look, read through all that sort of stuff and see how these people. So this is the prayer of the new age. And every full moon in June, groups all over the world pray that prayer to try and unite humanity under this cause. So again, 2025, a key date as far as the new age is concerned, when there's going to be this transition. Okay, so that's that one. Next one. The Pope has announced 2025 is going to be a jubilee of hope, a year of hope for Roman Catholic believers, and they're expecting 35 million plus visitors to Rome for that event in 2025. So that's just another little one using that date, 2025, the Jubilee, as far as the papacy is concerned. And number 6, climate change, climate issue. What's happening with that? Okay, on the 25th of May 2021, there was launched what's called the Laudato Si 7-year action plan. So you remember when the Pope came in, he put out the encyclical Laudato Si, and it was about everything that has to take place as far as climate's concerned. So in that 7-year plan, which started in 2021 and goes through till 2028, there's that number. The first year was to be a year of planning, right? So they're going out into the community, gathering in information, planning it all out. The next 5 years were to be taking concrete action. So in the planning phase, they're going to sharing with the community, resource sharing, and drafting local action plans. That was year 1, get the things set up. Interesting that it all took place during the pandemic. Right? So the pandemic, people's vision's taken off elsewhere, whereas things are going on behind the scenes. So the next 5 years are taking concrete action, and the 7th year, which is 2028, is going to be a sabbatical year of thanking and praising God for everything that's been accomplished. Right? So again, we've got these processes. Now this started in May. That's why it rolls through 12 months after, not exact years. So 2021, so 21, so 22, 23, 24, 25. So at the end of, midway through 25 and into 26 will be that end of that 5-year action period. So again, we're back into this sort of ballpark figure. Part of Laudato Si, which is what this is all about, the implementation of this program, is where the Pope talks about the need for a day of rest, a Sabbath rest for humanity. There's also the green Sabbath side of it. We need a day of rest as far as being able to control pollution and restore families, give everyone a break. So we need a day of rest for that, and it has other benefits. And obviously Sunday is the day that is being touted as the day that would be most suitable for most people to have off as a day of rest. So that's part of Laudato Si. So what's coming in under climate is this other agenda, which most people aren't picking up on at this point. But at some point, that's going to become very critical. All right, so that's 2025 and 2028. So we've seen that they're referencing these numbers as important dates. The final date, 2030, is, as many people know, is what's called Agenda 2030. Basically, Agenda 2030 again, 191 member states of the UN have signed up to this Agenda 2030. And it's the 5 Ps: people, prosperity, planet, partnership, and peace. And there are 17 sustainable development goals that have been adopted since 2016 for this Agenda 2030. So basically they're saying everything that's being implemented through here, the end date is 2030, when we want these things in place. We want healthcare, universal healthcare. We want poverty to be eliminated. We want everyone to have rights. We want women and children's rights to be protected. Minority groups and all these different things. We want their rights to be protected. We want fairness. We want cooperation. We want world peace, all by 2030. So what I sort of see here is that there's a date out there in the future where, what does the Bible say? Satan knows that he has a little time, a short time. And he knows that if he's going to implement some form of deception that's going to deceive the whole world, he's got to have a time frame in which he's got to do that before his time's up. Now, I believe Satan knows how much time he's got. And he's working hard to bring this into being so that the whole world will see him and accept him as the Christ. He will be the coming one. He will be the one who will bring world peace, will offer 1,000 years of peace on earth and give everybody a second chance. That's 2030. That's where it's heading. At the same time, the World Economic Forum, which is behind a lot of these pushes for CBDCs and all these different things, the World Economic Forum has already stated by 2030, you will own nothing and be happy. That's their goal, all right? By 2030, they want everyone to own nothing. We will be happy when that happens, exactly right. But this is to feed to the masses. So you'll own nothing and be happy. Everything will be rented, and you'll be given a universal basic wage, and out of that will come everything that you want. Your rent.
It's already started, mate. Spotify, Netflix.
Right.
You don't own music anymore. You've got to actually rent it. Keep on renting it if you want to listen to it.
All right.
Before long, you won't be able to buy it in the shops as a solid thing.
Okay.
Same with video shops. All rented.
Well, I listened to an ABC broadcast when I was driving to work the other day, and there was a singer, I think she's from the UK, really nice voice. Just one name, I can't remember her name. Anyway, she had her voice, what's the word? With AI simulated. And the guy was playing the song that she was singing, and midway through the song, it transitioned to the AI voice, the simulated voice. You couldn't pick the difference. Exactly the same. She then took that and said, okay, I'm going to put it out there onto the internet. Any musician, singer, songwriter who wants to use my voice can do so, as long as you give me half the royalties. Right, so she said, I've met a lot of really talented people who never get a break, or they can write a song, but they can't sing it, like you just said, or they can sing and they can go out, but their voice doesn't have the carry that my voice does as far as contacting. They don't have a fan base, basically. So you can use my voice, get you started, and then we go from there. 300 people have used her voice, put stuff out there. And what the reporter guy said, he said, imagine, he said, there's stuff I have to do in my job, which I hate. I can now have my voice simulated by AI, and they can do all the crap stuff. And I'll just do the stuff I like. Uh,
Long, you won't be needed at all.
Yeah, that's right. And apparently now too, with the new graphics that are coming out, there's a new Harrison Ford movie that's come out, another Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now this guy's in his late 70s or something. They've actually changed his, using AI, they've changed his facial features back to when he was like 40. And in the movie, it's him.
No, Star Wars too.
Big
It's Luke
Yeah.
Skywalker.
Right.
It's
So-
real.
There you go. And so,
Talking and everything.
yeah, and I'm noticing it coming up on stuff on YouTube too. You're seeing some old guy talking,
Yeah.
giving all the 12 facts of life and
Yeah.
different things, but there it's AI,
Yeah.
but very, very sophisticated. Oh yeah, Paul McCartney, they're taking John Lennon's voice and doing the last Beatles number. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the upside of it, is how it can be used. But the downside is that if they only need 3 seconds of my voice. This is what this guy was saying the other day. So someone could ring you and say, oh, is Frank there? And you say, oh no, there's no Frank here. You must have the wrong number, and hang up. They can take that amount of voice as a sample and then expand it out to make you say anything.
Maybe we should just start talking in deeper voice.
Yeah, maybe. And add that to video. And this is what happened a couple of weeks ago. I heard of some politician in Britain, I think it was, who was shown in a compromising situation with pornography, but it wasn't him. It was a CGI thing that had been made up with his voice attached to it. And everyone went, oh, this is really bad. But imagine what they can do. Now, if Christians are going to be hated by all men for his name's sake, what are they going to do with someone who says, well, I'm not going to take the certificate, I'm not going to bow down, I'm not going to eat the king's food, just trust in God? Well, you could see my face pop up on a pedophile, as a pedophile, or you could pop up as a terrorist of some thought, some position. Remember how those people up in Tara in Queensland who shot the police? Talked to my son about that yesterday. What he said, what my son said, was the thing that troubled him was that these people were supposedly Christians. They had, I'm in the world, but not of the world, as a slogan on their wall. In the world, but not. So what my son said was, my concern now is that anyone who's not mainstream, as a home church or as an independent church, will be targeted and labelled as radical terrorists, extreme, whatever, and you'll have no say in it. So, yeah, they'll have, for the newsreel, they'll have me saying something. People go, well, that's Dave, and that's his voice. That's him. Even if it's proven later that it wasn't, damage is done. Mud's sticking, and you can't get it off. Okay, now just let me close with all of these things there as supporting why these 3 dates are important. I'm not sure of when we actually did the studies, but it was last year, I think. Last year. We did studies in Daniel chapter 8, verse 14, under 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And we saw that 2,300 day period, and you can go onto the homepage or whatever it is, what do we call it? YouTube, Northern Rivers Home Church. Yeah, under the channel on YouTube, and look up the one that we did on the 2,300 days to give you the detail. Let me just move that so I can see me knocking that over. So this will be the cleansing of the sanctuary. That point. And if we come backwards from that point to the beginning, we will have a start date. If we know the end date, then we can find the start date. And we found that the cleansing of the sanctuary was actually this temple, this sanctuary is going to be cleansed. So let him that is filthy be filthy still, let him that is righteous be righteous still. When sin, this vile body is going to be made like unto his glorious body. That's the cleansing of the sanctuary, when sin is removed and we're given this new body, which is righteous, right? So that happens. When does that happen? When Jesus comes. So the dead in Christ are raised first in their new bodies, and we which are alive and remain shall be taken up to meet him in the air, and we will be changed. So now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. So then we will be known as we are known. So that takes place at the second coming of cleansing. So that's the second coming. And we looked at the festivals. So we saw the spring festivals, Passover, unleavened bread, all fulfilled by Jesus at his first coming. The ones that weren't fulfilled were the autumn festivals or the fall festivals of trumpets, Day of Atonement, and tabernacles. So the cleansing takes place on the Day of Atonement, which is usually around September, October. And because when Jesus was crucified, that was a high Sabbath, when the ceremonial Sabbath was held on the same day as the weekly Sabbath. They met together. That was called a high day. We surmise that, okay, if that happened at the first coming, at the second coming, then Day of Atonement may be a high day. And the high day, the next high day, that's applicable within that time frame, is the 27th of the 9th, 2031. Now, let's just make a supposition. Let's suppose that that's right and Satan knows that it's right. Let's suppose that that date is right and Satan knows it's right. At what point is he going to want to make sure that he's on board?
By 2030.
By 2030. He's got to give himself some space. So he's going to be focusing in here somewhere, his agenda. Yeah. Okay. So from that date, when you count back 2,300 literal days, you come to the date of the 9th of the 6th. Can you guess what year? 25. Exactly. And we surmising from Matthew 24 that this time of the end, this period of 6 years, 4 months and 10 days, whatever it is, begins when the rider on the white horse is given a crown and sent forth to conquer and to conquer, conquering and to conquer. Okay, so this is the white horse rider being crowned.
You don't think Charles
No.
fits that?
No way. So the rider is the Antichrist. It's not Jesus. It's the Antichrist. We've done all this. Yeah. So you can go back and check it. Anything. But that's the date. So 25. So that's that one. From this end time date, we also came back a period of there were 3 periods: 1260, 1290, and 1335. And all of those dates had the same beginning time. So when you count back, they sort of fall like that. And so this beginning time is the same for each of those, and they all finish further down the track. So again, you can follow that. The date for this commencement time that we came to was the 5th of the 2nd, what date? 28. So I'm looking at what's going on in the world, and I'm overlaying that over the prophetic studies we've done in the past. And I'm saying, okay, I can see that if this is Satan's agenda, this is what he's pushing for, to get things accomplished within these timeframes and get the earth to a point of submission and control by when he manifests, that we could well see this being the fulfillment of the time prophecy. So this here is, this date here is when the abomination of desolation is set up, and part and parcel of that is the Sunday law scenario, when that's enforced. So at the moment, Sunday is not the mark of the beast, because it's not representing anything like that at this point, but that's at the point where the abomination of desolation will be set up, and that's where we'll have to make a choice. This is where the true persecution is really going to start, right? Because it won't just be people who aren't vaxxed and making a stand on different. Now it's a whole different scenario. This will be pushed right through. I just found that was pretty interesting, that those dates, these are the dates that they're focusing on, and these are the dates potentially. I'm not saying
Dave,
he's going to.
I think the Christians in the fall of Jerusalem, when they saw the Roman armies surrounding Jerusalem, they took that in their time as the abomination of desolation was set up.
Yeah.
And they got out. I know it's more complicated than that, but basically no Christians were killed. And you know, they were basically, because the Israelites were, at that point, or the Jews, were non-compliant. That was the main reason why the Roman army wanted to squash them. They weren't going along and worshipping the gods or doing what the Romans wanted to say.
Yep.
So they said, we're going to exterminate them, and they starved them out, you know, basically because they didn't comply. And I think sort of it's pretty fierce, like you said, when we see that abomination of desolation set up in our day, it's serious. Like, they got starved out to the point they were eating their own children.
Yeah.
But at that point they couldn't change their mind, you know.
Yeah.
And everybody basically in Jerusalem, 1 million people got killed because there was people in there for Passover or whatever. Heaps of people had come to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
That was pretty bad, I think.
Yeah, well, the first Roman general who came was in 66 and withdrew, and then Titus came back in AD 70, and the temple was destroyed, burnt to the ground. The saying was that the soldiers, as they were going through, they could see all the gold dripping down in between the stones on the ground, so they ripped it all apart so that one stone was not left upon another. But yeah, at the end, the reason why the Christians got out, because Jesus has said, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then make a run. So when that first general withdrew, the Christians went, oh, here's our chance. And they got out, and they went up to towns up further up in other places. The Jews who were in Jerusalem pursued the Roman army and went to battle with them out of town, sort of thing. When they came back, the Christians were all gone, right? And then the Jews were dispersed. What's the end case scenario? Matthew 24 again. When the temple, this holy place where God resides in the most holy place as a believer, when God's people are surrounded by armies, right, then get ready to depart, because the armies are bent on destroying the temple. And this is what Satan wants. Yeah, we're coming to that point where we're being corralled, as one lady said. It's like the CBDCs is the final closing of the gate of our freedoms. We're being surrounded, and we won't be able to function. Well, that's the one I talked about, that GDHC.
Which means they can starve us out, basically. Starve us into conformity.
Yeah, exactly right. And can you imagine when you're making your stand, even family members saying, "Oh, how ridiculous! You know, just take it. You know, it's no big deal. It's not going to hurt." And I'm sure there were many Hebrew boys in the Babylonian University who were saying the same stuff to Shadrach, Meshach, and Daniel. Oh, it's just a bit of food. Doesn't matter. The interesting thing to me was that after 10 days of just eating vegetables and water, Daniel and his mates looked fairer and fatter and were smarter, 10 times smarter than all the others. Now, is that because the diet was so much more special for them, or contrarily, for Jews who weren't familiar with eating the rich food and the wine, they look crook, you know, because what sort of food do kings eat? Well, they like their pork and their crab and their prawns and all the foods and all the cakes and everything else, all the delicacies. And for Jews who weren't used to eating that food, probably made them pretty sick. So they didn't look too good at all. So it's not a matter of saying, well, I'm going to deny myself of all those delicacies. It's a matter of saying, well, you know, we've got 18 months really to get our act together. We've got 18 months, perhaps, could be more. And if it's more, okay, fine. But if it's not, if it's 18 months or less, at what point are we going to make a stand and say, well, now I'm going to purpose in my heart that I'm not going to defile myself and that I'm now going to make a stand for God? We've been in cruise mode most of the time, and we're now in this time of relative peace, if you like, but there's something brewing, and they've given us their time frame in which they want it to be put in. And if they implement that, if God allows that to be the case, which he may well do, he may well have already foretold us these are the time frames to be looking for. We've got 18 months before we enter from this period here into this time of trouble, which Jesus said hasn't been since there was a nation, until ultimately you come up to the very end here, which is the time of Jacob's trouble. So
How do you get 18 months to 2028?
18 months. Oh, well, sorry, back here. We're 2023. So 18 months till 2025 is what I meant to say, sorry. But that's when the persecution will start, but it'll be a little time of trouble compared to what's coming, what ultimately it's going to be. So we don't have a rosy future. We don't have, a road which is going to be full of light for us. For us, once we get through to this point, then everything starts moving.
In Revelation, it says sackcloth and ashes.
Sackcloth and ashes.
It's serious like every day.
But I think it's time, like, if we recognise what the true riches are, which are, you know, your family, your friends, your health, your relationship with God, like, they're worth more than gold. They're worth more than all those other things. And we've realised that through COVID, that a lot of the other stuff was worth nothing. You know, our jobs weren't secure, everything else fell apart, and it's that time where we can say, right, we can truly be rich. We already have all we need. Like, God's already provided everything. Exactly. that in our lives. Even right now, today, you can look and go, you've got so many blessings.
Yeah.
And regardless of what they do, if we value those things, a lot of those things, you know, they can't touch.
Yeah.
They can't take away.
They can't take your faith.
You have to deny self.
Yeah.
Now's the time to be denying self. We can't do it now. We're not going to survive that.
Exactly. So it comes down to perspective. How do we look at life? How do we look at stuff? You know, how tight a rein are we holding on the things that we enjoy, or are we willing to just let them go? And as time moves on, are we willing to let more and more stuff go? And imagine where we'd be today if Daniel and the three guys had eaten the king's food. Where would we be today? We wouldn't have the book of Daniel. We wouldn't have the whole prophetic time frame. We wouldn't have that instruction about bowing down. You know, what a loss we would have had. Oh, they definitely are. Yeah. 4 guys amidst hundreds of who were taken captive stood up, made a decision. I'm going to purpose in my heart. How many people did Jesus say would find the way of salvation? Few. Compared to the many that are going down the broad road. Few will find it.
Shall I find faith?
Yeah, that's what Jesus said. When I come, will I find faith? Is it possible there's going to be anyone left? And he says, for the sake of the elect, I'll cut it short. Otherwise, no flesh will be saved. Right? So it's really time now to start gearing up spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally, that, okay, war's coming. It's on the horizon. The winds are blowing. The winds of strife are starting to blow. And what's coming is going to be so traumatic, we're not going to be even able to comprehend how bad it's going to be. But like Daniel and the 3 worthies, once that starts and this happens, if God's desire is to preserve us through this, he'll do it.
That's where the faith happens.
He'll shut the lions' mouths. The heat of the fiery furnace won't touch us. You know? If you're wavering, Jesus said, if you're faithful in little things, I'll make you faithful in much. If you neglect the little things, then you'll neglect the big ones as well. You won't know the amazing things that God is going to do if you wilt here. Okay? If you're not setting yourself in concrete here, if you're not making your decisions now, well, then when you get to here, you wouldn't even know what God could have done, right? Because you won't be there. Yeah.
Our salvation.
Mm. Yeah.
That's such a serious
Yeah.
what do we think of that's still sick?
Well, how do you answer the question, what am I hanging on to? That's a hindrance. Well, what you do is you lay everything at God's feet and say, God, you tell me, you show me. Are these things a hindrance at this point in time? And whatever needs to be laid down, let me lay it down. Right? Because what is worth more than meeting Christ and seeing him face to face? Is there anything in this interim that is going to be more important than seeing him? No. And even though I may have made a wreck of my life, what a winner you're going to end up to be at this end. Because in God's eyes, you're a winner already. You accept his son, he's never going to be saying, tell me about all the sins you did. He's going to be telling, what did you do with my son? That's the most important question the Father has. Did you acknowledge who my son is? Did you submit to my son? Did you obey what he said? If you love me, keep my commandments. Are you doing that? Is that the priority of your life, or is your priority self? So God says, okay, go through this process here, and what's going to be the ultimate outcome? Welcome, my good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of the Lord. We'll go through those pearly gates. We'll sit at the marriage supper of the Lamb. We'll be looking around at the table, seeing all the people there, and just be feeling an amazing sense of what's the word, solidarity or oneness, because we all know where we came from and we all know where we are. And this is it forever. In the presence of God forever. How amazing is that going to be? I imagine each of us will just come up with, here we are. It happened. We got through. Wow. Let's keep that perspective rather than what we have to go through to get there. Jesus, when he got to the Garden of Gethsemane, that was his Garden of Gethsemane, wasn't it? He purposed in his heart in the garden that he's going through with the cross.
It wasn't easy for him. It's not going to be easy for us.
The stress and anxiety of taking upon the sin of the world caused his capillaries to break and his sweat blood. Imagine that. The Bible says if you resisted sin to the point of shedding of blood. Is that how you've resisted? Has that been your will, that you were willing to go through that process to deny yourself diet and pleasure and, you know, fame and power and all career. It all has to be laid down. And for each of us, we have to come to the point where we say, well, God, I lay this down. And if you bring conviction to me that this is necessary, then I'll lay it down.
There's a verse that comes to mind in Hebrews 12, that one that says, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God.
Right. And what was the joy that was set before him?
It's our salvation.
It's the group who go through. It's the group who go through. That this is the joy. It's the redeemed that Jesus takes to his Father and says, Dad, it was worth it. It was worth it, Dad, because look who's here. Here's Marie, here's Sharon, here's Mark. They're all here now. Wow. That's why he doesn't wipe tears away at this point, because we'll be shedding heaps. So thankful. And also tears for the lost. And so we have a work to do. Okay? When Jesus started his ministry, what's the first thing he did? Then came Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee to be baptized of John in the Jordan. And that starts that process. Your son started that process. Baptized. And then he went out and he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath and he preached. And they were amazed at his doctrine. And then he healed. He first of all healed a man with an unclean spirit. Drove out an unclean spirit. Then he heals a man with the palsy. He was lame, had to be lowered down through the roof on a bed. And he heals him. And then he heals a man with a withered hand. He says, put out your hand. He put it out and it was made whole like the other one. And it says that he goes throughout all of Galilee to all the synagogues preaching and casting out demons. So many demons out there. People dealing with the demons. This is the thing we'll be doing. It says that group will be doing miracles, calling fire down, doing all sorts of things. Once that call is made, as soon as Jesus is called, he went. That was it. And that'll be us. At some point, we're going to be called, and away we go. And it's going to happen between year and year. Somewhere in there. Well, friends, I pray that was a blessing. I pray that even though you may not understand it all, I certainly don't. Even though you may not agree with it all, that's fine. But I encourage you to study it through, look at it, think about it. But first of all, make a decision of whether we are going to, purpose in our hearts. That's the key for what's coming. Purpose in our hearts. Our gracious Father, we are humbled, Father, by what you've revealed to us. We know that you know the end from the beginning, and before these things come to pass, you tell us what they are, so that when they do come to pass, we know that it's true. So help us, Father, to be like little children, to open our hearts and minds in innocence, to be taught of you, not to be in any sense exclusive or, a cult or anything like that, but just to be simple worshippers of your truth. We want to honour you in everything that we say, think and do, that this temple may be a fitting place for you to reside. Forgive us, Father, for our sins. Forgive us for our impertinence, for our impatience, for all the things that we do that dishonour you or make you feel sad. May we just come into line with you, Father. I pray this in Jesus' name.